Recording has begun.
Thank you very much. All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our regular town council meeting. I would like to officially call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Madam Town Clerk, could you please do a roll call?
Councilman Gutenberg,
Here.
Councilman McCormick,
Here.
Councilman Sampson,
Here.
Councilman Johnson,
Here.
Mayor James.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much. If you all would please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And council, if you've had a moment to look at the agenda, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you very much, Councilman Gutenberg. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Councilman McCormick. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to our next item on the agenda, disclosure of closed session that was held just before this one on August 11th. In accordance with the Maryland Open Meetings Act, annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions, Article 3-211, we are required to include specific information in the minutes when a public body meets in closed session. To ensure full compliance, we will attach on our next meeting the written statement that includes the reason for closing the meeting, the statutory authority permitting the closed session, a listing of topics discussed, the individuals present, and the action taken. This documentation will be made part of the public record to maintain transparency and meet the legal requirements of the Act. Next on our agenda is a consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you very much, Councilman Sampson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Gutenberg. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. This brings us to a portion of our meeting where we have public comment. If anyone would like to speak this evening, please let me know. I ask that you state your name, whether you live in the incorporated town limits, and if you could limit your comments to 3 minutes, that would be appreciated. Do I have anybody who would like to speak tonight? Okay. So now we go on to our matters of council discussion. First on the agenda is discussions of topics for the council's goal settings on September 17th. And I will turn that over to you, Mr. Stevens.
All right, good evening, council. I'm Chuck Stevens, the town manager. Your first agenda item this evening is setting the stage for your annual goal setting retreat. The retreat is scheduled to take place on September 17th. Venue is yet to be determined, and really the agenda is going to shape that. If we need AV support, we'll have to find an accommodation for that. And what this agenda item is really about is to start your thinking, potentially even have a conversation this evening. If there are topics already top of mind for council, if you want to provide them this evening, I'll jot them down. But ultimately, between now and September 3rd, Emily Gruz of the Zellos Group, who you've met now a number of times, will be conducting one-on-one interviews with all of you to really dig deep into what agenda items you want to see for the goal setting retreat. So again, the retreat's going to be on September 17th. Between now and September 3rd, Emily will be scheduling appointments for you as we've done in the past. You'll be having one-on-one sessions. And then this evening, if there are things that are already top of mind, I'm happy to jot them down. And that's your staff report for tonight.
Thank you very much. I will open the floor to council. Go ahead, Councilman Gutenberg.
Yeah, really just, so in order to prep for the interviews with Emily on the 3rd, when do you want to have our written input by?
I'm happy to receive verbal or written input anytime between now and September 3rd. Again, we'll be scheduling those interviews between now, no later than the 3rd. The 3rd is when we will be building the agenda.
Okay, understood. Yeah, then my intent, so last year, I think what the procedure process was, we submitted them in writing. That became part of the record as well. And then the rest of the, kind of doing it the same way.
You certainly can. I think
Okay.
what you're referring to was prior to my arrival, I think council independently, if I recall, you all independently came up with things that you were interested in, whether they're priorities, goals or whatnot. And there was this huge list that we needed to work through and process. So I don't know that we're going to have that this year. I think that after being in the seats now for a year, some of that's probably, hopefully been accomplished, but also distilled a little bit, and your priorities are probably a little more focused now that you've been in the role and you see what this legislative body is responsible for and is doing. But if you want to give me a spreadsheet with 30 items on it, I'll take it. We'll consolidate it and we'll address it
Okay.
however.
My list certainly won't be that long, but here's what I'll do. I will tell you that what I intend to do is provide you a written feedback on it by Monday of next week. So that
Excellent.
way
Thank
it
you.
should be in line. Thank you.
Councilman McCormick.
Yeah, thanks for this, Mr. Stevens. Looking forward to this discussion. I think you know this. I've sent it to you, and I think it's actually on a future agenda before this retreat. But for the council, what I'm hoping to discuss for forward looking, especially as we head into year 2 and make that drive into year 3, is election reform. And I think it's important to do it now at the middle point rather than doing it closer to the election, so that we don't create a system that could be perceived as benefiting anybody on the council or harming anybody or disenfranchising anybody. So I have a written report to Mr. Stevens. It'll be presented on the 11th, I believe.
September 8th.
September 8th. Again, that's just strictly for conversation to hopefully present some ideas, take feedback from the council for what we can potentially discuss on the 17th. So that's one of the items that was on our goal setting retreat from last year, but it purposely was an action because timing, priorities. Now that we're starting to set a foundation here, I think it's appropriate to bring it up. So I just want to bring the council's attention to your attention, Mr. Stevens, and appreciate that.
All right, Councilman Sampson.
I'll provide you written feedback here in about a week.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councilman Johnson.
Yep, you have mine already. Unless I get really thoughtful between now and Monday, it should be set in stone.
Understood. Mayor?
All right, so I gave this a lot of thought and I looked at it through the lens of residents as well as what our duties are. You know, we are elected by 11,000 people, or we are held accountable to 11,000 people. I think there was only 700 who came out. But what is it that the tax dollars are getting for our residents? The community center is a top priority to move forward with that. The dashboard on the website to make it so that there is some type of, they can see our tracking, what we have set out to do and what we have done. Where are we on that time frame? And I think that that should be very easy for any resident to look at. I know we've done a lot with, we're addressing, it's going to be worse, get worse before it gets better on the traffic because we have Route 6 that is coming through, but we did a great job with things that are visible like our Wills Park. That is something that we can be very, very proud of. When speaking with several residents at National Night Out, someone came up with, what are we doing with vacant commercial property? And that's a that's a blight in our town. Is there something we can do to motivate? And then, of course, always, the one thing that comes back is what can we do for a small town character and placemaking? How can we bring that back? We're growing, yes, but how can we make it feel there? So those are some ideas that I have been tossing around, and I am very happy to put them in writing so that you have something that you can go back and forth to. But I'm looking at it through the lens of the residents and seeing what we can do to make a noticeable difference for our town. All right. So I think that you're going to be getting a lot of emails over the weekend.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, so next on our agenda is lost it there. Letter to Department of Housing and Community Development on Oriole Lane Apartments.
And I'll go through the staff report here, but I just want to be really, really clear because this has nothing to do with a planning project yet. Okay, so there is a piece of property in the town and there is an owner and a developer that have a vision and they're trying to build a capital stack or line up funding to make this vision come to reality. And they want to take advantage of state and federal incentives to build that capital to bring this development to fruition. Okay. They have requested, they're going to apply for state money. As a matter of course, as an agency, the local government, the state has extended an opportunity for the town to provide comment. So this is on the funding application. It has nothing to do with the merits of the project. Okay, and I just want to be really crystal clear about that, because if this project moves forward, whether or not it gets incentivized money from the state or federal government, if the developer says, okay, I didn't get that money, I'm still going to go forward with my project, they absolutely need to come through the town. They got to go to the planning department. They got to fill out an application. They're going to have to prove adequate public facilities. They got to go through the whole thing, through the planning commission and then ultimately up here to the town council. That is not what this agenda item is for. It is very, very common for governments to provide agency comments on things of this nature. We provide comments. Sometimes we send planning projects out for agency comment, whether it's to the volunteer fire department or to the state highway administration. Agency comment. This is coming before council because this letter was addressed directly to the mayor and the mayor passed it along to me. And so we're bringing it here. Had this been a staff to staff coordination, which is most of the time for something like this, you would see that this would not have come before council. Okay. But for the fact that it came directly to the mayor provided it to me immediately. So we're bringing it here to discuss in this forum. So with that as the foundation, I'll go through my staff report. So the town did receive formal written notice from the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development that it has received an application from Osprey Property Company LLC for financing of a proposed Oriole Lane Apartments development. DHCD, that's the Department of Housing and Community Development, notice dated July 27th, was sent directly to the mayor, consistent with the statutory requirement that DHCD provide local governments written notice of and a reasonable opportunity to comment on applications for low-income housing tax credits. And you'll often hear that referred to as LIHTC. Okay, low-income housing tax credits, LIHTC. Under state and federal law, the town has 45 days from the date of the letter to review the project and submit comments. And so when we receive this, what we do, because again, the planning project hasn't come forward. So we're just looking at it in alignment with our foundational documents. So our strategic plan and our comp plan, and we're going to provide comments based on the review of those two documents. Okay. In your staff report, I do give a summary of the project. Again, this is how it is envisioned by the developer before they even sat down with our planning department. So this hasn't gone anywhere. This is literally someone's vision, but they haven't come in yet to sit down and see what's possible. And that's all in your staff report. So here's where we get to the meat of the comment letter. This would be consistency with town planning documents. And in your packet, staff has prepared a draft comment letter. And we find that the project generally aligns with the town's adopted planning framework. Specifically, the 2022 strategic plan, equity and inclusivity, reserving 96% of units for households at or below 60% AMI, supports the town's equity pillar. Again, these are all based on representations made by the developer before the project has gone through the process. The 2022 strategic plan, economic prosperity goal number 3, addresses a documented gap in multifamily housing stock. 376 single-family permits issued since 2009 versus 1 multifamily permit. The 2022 strategic plan, community identity goal number 4, proposed high-quality finishes and professional management are intended to support neighborhood standards. The 2020 comp plan, housing diversity goal number 24, supports the plan's call for a range of housing density type, cost, and size. The 2020 comp plan, walkability, the town will look for the developer to provide safe pedestrian connections to the Van Gogh Transit and downtown amenities. The 2020 comprehensive plan, environmental protection, goals 7 and 12. The site is near the Tier 2 Port Tobacco River watershed. The town expects stormwater management to meet or exceed requirements through environmental site design. As new construction, the project will be subject to the town's major facility fees for water and sewer infrastructure, which are intended to ensure that costs of serving new customers are recovered equitably and support the town's long-term fiscal sustainability. The fiscal impact, there's no direct fiscal impact associated with this action. The town is not being asked to appropriate funds, approve financing, or commit any town resources. Council's action is limited to authorizing transmittal of a comment letter to DHCD in response to a state notice of a private financing application. Any future considerations tied to the project itself would be addressed separately through the town's standard site plan and permitting process. Within your packet, you've got the strategic plan alignment, the sustainability considerations, as well as ADA considerations. Your recommended action this evening is to adopt Resolution 26-46, a resolution authorizing the mayor to transmit a comment letter to the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development in response to DHCD's July 27, 2026 notice regarding the Oriole Lane Apartments financing application, with comments due no later than September 10th, 2026. This action authorizes transmittal of the comment letter only and does not constitute town approval, endorsement, or entitlement of the Oriole Lane Apartments project, which remains subject to the town's standard land use, site plan, and permitting review processes. And I'm happy to answer any questions for you.
All right, Councilman Gutenberg.
Yes. So not going down the planning path here, but I think it's a really good thing. I think that this comes to the council for discussion, because I think it gives us the opportunity to talk about some things that we may need to do as a council to support community objectives as outlined in the comprehensive plan. And so when I look at the comprehensive plan, I generally agree with what staff said. But when I look at like the numbers in the comprehensive plan since 2019 through today, if you just look at that plan, it gives you that number of like 400 and some. But if you look at the planning department reports year to year, all the way through to present, you actually get a much bigger disparity. It's since 2009, my math, right, just looking at it casually, looks like it's more like 1,200 single family homes and townhouse units since 2009. And with really only, again, a minuscule one project, I think that was an affordable housing project, which is Magnolia. So we, as a town, the premier planning document we have is that comprehensive plan, and that is the best amalgamation of the community's desires for planning and goal setting in regards to those things. And clearly there is a need identified in that plan for equitable housing. Right. And so for that reason, I support that, because I think our community supports that. Larger than that, the county also realizes that we have a problem in Charles County with affordable housing, as does the state. And so you have all layers of local, regional, and state government all saying the same thing. I think we can trust we really do need this. So in that way, I am very much in support of this. But the thing I wanted to layer on this is that, so we just did an APFO as an example. And one of the things I talked about when we did that is that in the future, we may come across things that are unintended consequences. There's a lot of good that comes with that, but there may be some consequences that we will need to address and fine tune. And I think this is an area where we may want to have that conversation in the future in the following way. What I suspect is that in laying out a project like this, the property owner / developer who has got this vision and wants to do this and is out seeking funding is going to have to take out construction loans versus operating loans afterwards. And so, anyone who's ever built a house knows that the loan you get for the construction loan has got different terms than the one once you have an occupancy permit. And our APFO is going to ask for a lot of things up front to pay for the infrastructure that a development of that size is going to need. And I can also see, connections with when we talk about walkability, that site is adjacent to several commercial zones and that's part of its site plan, but you can't walk from that site to any of them. And so I could forecast out that a planning commission is going to ask for things like that, and it's going to be legitimately linked to other strategic goals. Again, that just adds more cost. The problem with those costs, especially front loading them as conditions, is that it makes the money that they're going to have to get to execute on a project like that later far more expensive. It could actually price the project out of being viable in the town of La Plata. And so there's things we could do. We don't need to go into all here, but I think there are things we can do because other communities do them, where you can access grants that state and federal government have related to affordable housing projects that the town could access to create a fund that would allow us to pay for from grants those APFO requirements that then would offset them having to do that in the beginning, and then they would pay the town once they have the better terms, and therefore they avoid those kinds of costs. Because ultimately, we often say, let's put this cost on the developer. Well, the developer passes the cost through to the person who's living there, right? Whether we're buying a house or we're renting an apartment. And so that's how we are going to have decisions that we could potentially make. And so I say this to you for town staff purposes too. When it gets to a point where it's engaging at that level, it would be great for that party, that applicant, to have those kinds of discussions about what their needs are with town staff, so that suggestions can be brought to council. That's not planning commission stuff. That's council, I think, level things that we would have to consider and address and see what we could potentially do. So that's the long way of getting to, I'll reaffirm that, and that I would really like us to be having our listening ears on for what we can do to help facilitate the vision that's being talked about.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilman McCormick?
Yeah, thank you for presenting this. Again, I think the ask is relatively straightforward. I have no comments at this time.
Thank you. Councilman Sampson?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the mayor responding back. I mean, that's fine. I do have some questions though, and I know you probably haven't even had a chance to look at this because this was not the ask of this. But I do have a question of, does a project like this add or take away from our tax base? That is a question I have for these particular units. And I don't know if you can speak to anything. Now I'm just talking about in general.
I can tell you that we're going to be able to answer that question definitively here by the end of the year. The Matrix Consulting Group that's doing the fiscal impact of zoning at the parcel level for the town is proceeding quite well. We expect to have that report to council before the end of the year. That's really going to help inform council and answer questions like that.
Yep. And then, the same thing goes for, even though this is more on the planning commission side, the infrastructure. And I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is, and I can't remember off the top of my head, and I know this is not exactly the same thing, but for new units, what is the status? I know we have the APFO, but what is the status of thing like water usage, the county-town agreement and all that, as these new items are coming up? How would that, and once again, I know you may not be able to answer that because that wasn't the answer, but just in your
Well, I
general
can-
thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can speak in broad terms. So, our conversations with the county are proceeding and are going quite well. And it's still my hope and desire to be able to bring some kind of terms back to this council before the end of the year to consider. I'll keep you posted if we get off track there. But more specifically, we have, it's basically, there's a saying in the water world, first in time, first in line, when you're talking about water rights. And it's really the same thing here. So we've got a running list, broken out by categories of which developments or builders have full entitlement, which ones are next in the chute, which ones have preliminary plat approvals and are waiting for supplemental water before they can move forward. And then we have, categories 4 and 5 after that. So a new development can move through the process up to the point of preliminary plat approval, and they'll get in line at the bottom, ranked according to the date of their plat approval, and that will be the seniority list that we use. So people can continue to move through the planning process, but they're being halted where they've been halted by the town since, I believe, 2024. I don't remember the exact month, pending a solution to the water.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
Thank you. Councilman Johnson?
Yeah, one, I'm glad this came off a consent agenda because it's a very important question as we talk about development in town and the APFO. And it's a good news story that anytime that any developer want to come to the community to provide affordable housing, given the shortage across the region, which is, I think the last number Maryland had was like 45,000 units spread out across the state. There's a shortage of affordable housing. If we can provide 72 units for a family at area medium income is critically important in general, given the rising cost of living. So I support the vision of the developer applying for this grant, and I hope that they stay true to their vision whenever that time comes to go through the planning process.
This is similar to the process that Magnolia Gardens went through with the letter to begin with and then the vision. That's correct, right?
I wasn't here for the front end of that, so I assume it's probably very, very similar.
And I believe that process started in 2019. And it took them several years to go through everything that they need to in order to finally come to the Planning Commission. Has the developer presented his vision to you already? I thought we saw this.
I have not. That doesn't mean it hasn't been presented to the planning commission or the planning department.
I can speak a little bit to that. So I don't know if it is the same developer, but this project was presented to the Planning Commission in 2021. And this is scaled down a little bit from that for some specific zoning reasons, but there is a whole, it's out there on the web. You can look at the,
Yeah, that's what I thought on that. Not that there's here nor there, but I think there was a comment made that it hasn't gone to planning, and I think that it had. I thought that I recalled that. And you
I would say though that it has changed significantly from its form. And again, I can't speak to whether it's the same developer, but it's the same parcel with the same name.
It's been a minute too. Okay, so I'm looking for a consensus. Oh, go ahead.
I apologize. Councilman Johnson actually triggered a question. So right now, we're essentially talking about the vision that this developer has for this project in Oriole Lane. Let's say the developer changes their mind. What is the impact of us saying, yes, we agree with this vision, and then the developer comes back with, let's say, a third plan?
So your comment, you're providing comments on what was presented as a part of the application for this incentivized funding. So if the developer changes that, they're going to have bigger issues if they were awarded money, number one.
And that's where I'm getting at, right? So there's no way that the town of La Plata, if we were to support this letter, and developer turns around and gets grant money for a certain purpose and doesn't follow through on it, that we're suddenly thrown into the mix because we wrote this letter.
I
or support
can
this letter.
assure all of you that the strings required with reporting on federal money, especially on LIHTC dollars, are incredibly stringent.
Great.
Which sometimes acts as a barrier to developers.
Sure.
But if they go forward with this application and say, we are going to do this with your money, they will be held to that standard.
And this leads to a second question. So let's say they are awarded this money and they want to go through with the vision here, and it goes through the planning commission, all criteria met to our new adequate public facilities ordinance, et cetera. Okay. Do they at any point, because they have this special designation or because they are considered low income housing, right, or affordable housing, do they jump the line for other developers that maybe don't meet those criteria, meaning they're not getting federal grant money?
They do not. Our
Okay.
code does not provide a provision for that.
Okay.
However, if that is council's desire, we can certainly create code language that would do that.
Okay. Yeah. And again, no, from me, right? But I just want to make sure that there's nothing federally that's going to supersede, right, Maryland or Charles County or La Plata that goes, all right, well, we gave them the federal grant money. We want to see the fruit of this project. Nothing like that can happen or be forced down from us or on us.
Our code, we have autonomy within our code.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, so I'm looking for a consensus to have this letter sent to the Department of Housing and Community Development as presented. Councilman Gutenberg,
Yes.
Councilman McCormick,
Yes.
Councilman Sampson,
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, so we'll get that sent off. All right, next on the agenda is sidewalks and curb maintenance.
Okay, council, you remember at your last meeting on July 28th, we had a very robust conversation about sidewalk maintenance and some of the challenges that the staff has discovered with the way our code is written and how we are actually doing maintenance and the misalignment between those two. So we had a great conversation. Staff did not ask for council to make any legislative decisions on that evening, but to give it a direction. And you did that, and you did that exceedingly well. And so tonight, we are back in front of you to talk about sidewalks. We believe that we have addressed your questions and concerns. I'll briefly step through the standard agenda item, but then I'm going to get to a document that I called the summary of changes, where I'll walk through what we heard as council direction, how we attempted to address that in what I'm referring to as a hybrid policy between a binary choice between town responsibility and resident responsibility. Okay. So I'll just jump in right there. So we have developed this hybrid policy, which we believe responds directly to each of the points that were raised on the 28th. It combines a non-revocable town commitment to repair the most serious or priority hazard conditions with a structured 50% cost share program for lesser deficiencies, and it resolves the specific edge cases that Councilor Gutenberg raised. And some of the highlights of the policy include the standing non-revocable town commitment to repair those priority hazard conditions funded outside of and unaffected by the separate cost share program's annual cap. It provides objective measurable criteria distinguishing curbing deficiencies, sidewalk deficiencies, and those priority hazard conditions, giving staff a consistent basis for a response. It provides a cost share program for below threshold repairs, offering residents a choice between a town performed repair with a 50/50 cost share or an owner performed repair under permit with a repayment plan available for owners who may be unable to pay in a single installment. We believe it resolved the jurisdictional and equity questions raised by the council, specifically the state county road frontage, the non-fronting lots, the orphan segments, HOA communities, and we've built in a firm rule that billing will be directed only to the owner of record and never to a tenant. Let's see. And I think, I guess I'll cover a little bit of fiscal impact. So the hybrid policy divides funding into two components: the priority hazard guarantee, which is funded without a program cap because it will be a standing safety commitment by the town, and what I call Path A, basically two paths for residents, Path A and Path B. Path A being a cost share program, which will be funded through a capped annual allocation set through the normal budgeting process. The town's current $80,000 sidewalk maintenance line item reflects historical complaint-driven spending and should be treated as a starting point and a floor rather than a forecast of cost under the hybrid policy for two reasons. The policy shifts the town from responding only to reported conditions toward proactively meeting an objective standard, which will surface the cost of historical data it did not capture. And the sidewalk network has grown materially through new development, so that spending history was never established. So the historical spend is absolutely a floor and a predictor, but we're gonna, if we shift from a complaint-based policy to a more proactive standards-based maintenance program, we're really gonna have to watch it carefully and build this as we go during the regular budget cycle. Okay, with that, I'm just gonna get to the recommended action, and then I'm gonna jump over and start lining out what we heard and how we've tried to address it. So this evening, council, we're asking that you give staff direction. We can either proceed this evening and take legislative action. If you feel like we're ready to go, we can do that. It's in your packet and it's there. We can do that. Or you can make tweaks, send us back. We can come back to you on the 25th. There's one item in particular that I really would like to hear from council directly on, and that is, this is an administrative policy and it can live as an administrative policy, and we can leave the code unchanged and leave it exactly as it is, or we can modify the code a little bit just to reflect and probably just point to this policy. So that'll be a question. If we're going to change the code, we will not be doing that tonight, because we'll need to go back and do code language. That would be an ordinance that we'll have to bring forward for a code change in conjunction with the administrative policy. So the summary of changes. I won't give you the background. We talked about it. So tried to lay it out for you as logically as I could. It starts with, here's what we heard, council direction. So just jumping right into it, the council expressed a preference that whatever policy is adopted be dependable and durable so that residents can rely on it and not be told the town might withdraw the service if budgets tightened. Policy response. The policy establishes the town's commitment to repair priority hazard conditions as a standing obligation that is not contingent on annual appropriation levels and cannot be suspended or reduced except by future council action formally amending the policy. To keep this guarantee genuinely durable, funding is split into two separate buckets. The priority hazard commitment is funded without a program cap, while the lower severity cost share program is separately capped. The annual cap, therefore, never reaches the safety guarantee. What we heard, council direction, the council confirmed staff's stated need for objective, quantifiable standards to distinguish a true public safety hazard from a cosmetic complaint, noting that the town currently has no measurable criteria to fall back on when responding to residents. The policy response, the policy adopts measurable deficiency criteria and a distinct priority hazard classification. That's in section 4 of the draft policy, giving staff an objective basis to determine what the town will act on and how quickly. The classification is what triggers the town's non-revocable commitment, so the standard and the commitment are tied together. We heard council discuss cost sharing and resident support approaches used by other Maryland municipalities as a middle path between the two original options, including percentage-based sharing and having the town perform work and bill the residents. Policy response for conditions below the priority hazard threshold. The policy creates a cost share program in section 5, under which the resident chooses either to have the town perform the repair and be billed 50% of the cost, or to hire a permitted contractor at the resident's own expense. This preserves resident choice while ensuring work performed through the town meets applicable standards. Council direction that we heard, the council was cautious about placing sudden or unaffordable costs on residents who have not previously had to bear them, while also recognizing that the town cannot absorb every cost without limit. Our policy response, the cost share program limits the resident's exposure to 50% of eligible repairs and offers a repayment plan over time for residents who cannot pay their share at once. That's in section 5.5. Consistent with the town's current code and practice, the policy does not create a reduced cost or waived cost option. The repayment plan addresses the timing of payment only. And I believe that was Councilor Sampson raised that concern. What we heard, council direction, the council raised the liability implications of shifting maintenance responsibility and asked that these be understood before a decision is made. The policy response. So reached out to our town attorney and had a conversation with Mr. Pounds and summarized what we discussed. And so he advised that the liability outcomes in this area are highly fact specific and generally turn on who performed the work that caused an injury and where. So in summary, if the town performs a repair within the easement, as it does under the priority hazard guarantee and under path A of the cost share program, the town bears liability for that work and any resulting claim is handled through our risk manager Legit. When an owner performs the repair themselves or through a private contractor under path B, liability generally follows the party that performed the work. Legit coverage does not extend to the homeowner in this scenario. Whether the homeowner is covered would depend on the homeowner's own insurance policy. Regardless of who performs the repair, the town's permit and inspection role for all right-of-way work preserves some town exposure. Council noted that the town could face a claim for a defective inspection even where an owner performed the underlying work. Council also flagged that private contractors performing owner side repairs must take care not to disturb utilities located within the easement. Council cautioned that a specific injury claim would likely require a case-by-case negligence analysis among all involved parties, the town, the developer, and or homeowner, to determine who ultimately bears responsibility. There is no categorical rule that resolves every scenario in advance. And I think what we know to be true in reality is that if there is a lawsuit, they're going to sue everybody anyway and just see what sticks. This guidance confirms that the hybrid policy's allocation of responsibility is legally coherent. Town performed work carries town liability exposure, and owner performed work under path B shifts exposure to the owner, subject to the town's permit and inspection role. Council also asked for a little bit of history about claims that have been made. So we've reviewed all the claims since 2015 to present day, and we've identified a grand total of 2 claims. One was a report only, one was a claim. One was in March of 2015, the second was in 2018, and that's all that we have. Council direction, what we heard, the council raised the liability implications of shifting maintenance responsibility and asked that these be understood before a decision is made. And I think I just walked through that, but the policy response, the policy preserves the town's existing cost recovery authority for owner caused and third-party caused damage. That's in section 3.3, and its permit and inspection authority over all right-of-way work, and that's in section 3.2. What we heard from council, the council identified several fairness and jurisdictional gaps, including sidewalks along state or county-owned roads that the town does not own, sidewalks that back up to properties rather than fronting them, segments with no clear responsible owner, and communities where an HOA already funds upkeep. The policy response. The policy addresses each of these directly in section 6. Sidewalks along state and county roads within the corporate limits are placed within the town responsibility consistent with the Maryland Transportation Code. Owners of lots that only back onto a sidewalk are not asked to cost share for that segment. Segments with no identifiable responsible owner are funded entirely by the town. An HOA that already funds structural sidewalk repair may certify that and be billed in place of its individual members. The priority hazard guarantee applies uniformly across all of these situations, meaning if it's a public safety hazard, the town is going to repair it at town expense. Public safety hazard as defined against quantifiable standards that are now in the policy. Well, we heard council direction. The council noted the difficulty of holding renters accountable when the property owner, not the tenant, is the responsible party. Our response, the policy directs all billing and repayment obligations to the owner of record as reflected in tax assessment records and expressly states that the town will not bill a tenant or renter. That's in section 5.6. Council direction. the council recognized that day-to-day upkeep such as snow and weed removal is a separate matter from structural repair, and that a town-wide condition survey and ADA compliance work will be needed regardless of the policy chosen. The policy response, the policy leaves the existing owner obligations for grass, weed, and snow removal unchanged. That's section 11. And it builds ADA compliance into every repair path and the town's inspection program. That's in section 10. It also anticipates the condition inventory and deferred maintenance queue the survey will inform. That's in section 8. I talked a little bit about the budget already, and I think that's about it for the crosswalk. Recommended next steps, staff recommends the council review the attached hybrid policy alongside the 2 original draft options and provide staff direction this evening. Happy to get a drink and answer your questions.
All right, we'll start with Councilman Goodberg.
All right, thank you. So this has been an interesting journey on this topic, right? Didn't see this one coming in my time on the council. I have not had anybody approach me on the topic of sidewalk repairs. It's almost always been sidewalk segments missing or just, additional sidewalks, things like that. So, but when you brought this issue last time, when we talked about this the last council meeting, clearly there was a problem, right? Like the concept of cafeteria code, where as a small town, we were picking and choosing what we were enforcing is not a scenario that I would want us to be in. And so I'm really happy that you brought this to us. And while I was, in the original piece that you brought us, I was really torn about it because the easiest fix to the problem seemed to be, well, I mean, there's existing code, and the existing code solves the problem. But as we got into the conversation, went through the edge cases and kind of just as I was pulling through stuff, there was more here. And what I'd like to say to you is, first of all, I think staff has done an outstanding job in pulling together this response so fast to what we talked about here last time. And I think there is an immense amount of really good stuff here. And I think we are pretty close to having something that we can do. So couple of questions that I have though, related to the priority hazards. So I really like the proactive switch to the town surveying sidewalks and identifying these priority hazards. What I suspect that'll mean is that there's going to be a surge of them because we have been reactionary to date and don't have a problem with that. I think that is good that we go and fix this. I think it's in alignment with our comprehensive plan and our strategic plan, and I think we should do this. My question is, though, in cost recovery, that being 100%, the way I'm understanding it is that we would find those things, fix them in the timelines that are provided, and the town is funding it. But are we afterwards, based on our assessment of the cause of the damage, are we doing a 50-50 cost recovery? Or is it once it reaches that state, it's just paid for by us?
The way it's drafted is, once we've identified a public safety hazard, the town is just going to own it. And we're
Okay.
going to go fix it. And we're going to fund it from the general fund, and we're going to pay for it. If it's replacing a panel or 2 or 3. And that's frankly the practice. That's been what's happening. That's capturing the status quo, because we've been a complaint-based system and we've just been going out there and replacing panels and doing it.
Okay.
So that really is just memorializing how we've been doing business, but putting some side rails around it.
Okay. Then we don't have to solve it tonight, but the wrinkle that I'm struggling with is in a scenario where I'm a property owner and I have something that is not at the priority hazard level, but it is a deficiency. If I can keep that off the town's radar and let it get worse, I'm incentivized not to deal with it because then I share in the cost. But if I let it get worse, I get out of it.
That is absolutely a scenario.
Yeah. And so I don't know how big of a problem that is. I don't know.
All of this is predicated on, we're going to do a survey of our sidewalks. I'll have a contract in front of council here shortly. We're actually, GIS is trying to map all of our sidewalks so we can get the cost estimate for the contract. We plan on using the same company that you just approved earlier on consent, City Logics. So we're ready to go and get a survey. So we're going to be informed about the conditions of our sidewalks. And by shifting from a complaint-based reactionary model to a more proactive, obviously, we're going to deal with safety hazards first. And then, but our condition survey is going to show us whether it's a stoplight chart, red, yellow, green, or whether it's a percentage or a letter grade, whatever. As soon as we get done with the public safety hazards, we're going to move down to the next tier. And that's where we'll be knocking on doors and saying, your sidewalk is, this and it needs to be repaired. And you have two options.
Okay.
You can either cost share with us at 50%, or you can go your own route. And here's the number to the planning department to come pull a permit.
Okay. All right. And then I'll try and go through these real quick, but because this is a policy that would result potentially in, if someone didn't have the ability to pay or chose to fight the way the rule is written, that a lien could be placed on a homeowner's property. For that reason alone, I think this has to be done as an ordinance, or it just doesn't. I find it problematic as a policy for enforcement. Then quickly, we've talked about this very much in the context of residential sidewalks, commercial sidewalks. So I could imagine a scenario where a sidewalk goes bad in front of Walgreens, there's sidewalk there. Just picking them out randomly, but I don't know if it's not that I don't know. I'm sure I feel differently about the town paying for half of the repair for an entity, like a corporate entity that owns commercial property, than I do about a resident in a home they own and live in. So I feel like that's an area that I don't have the solution for you, but it's a thing that I'd like us to address what we think is fair and correct there. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about. So in section 5.5, the timing piece where we make accommodations for folks to have a different payment method. And the more I kind of think about it, when the outcome of a policy could result in a lien being put on a homeowner's property, I don't think there's no discussion of the lien being resolved in any other way than at the time of sale. However, I really don't like the idea of the town putting a lien on a homeowner's property when the homeowner is, in particular, maybe elderly on a fixed income or a distressed family. And I think that probably there's some compassionate thing that we could do in policy where we set aside some amount of money, or so we can do a local grant or address those things without in scenarios where there is an established need in that way, that we can address it in a way that isn't so heavy-handed in those specific circumstances.
If I can real quick. So the lien is not new for this.
Agreed.
So we have a code enforcement officer, and we have the power and authority to issue citations to residents for any code violation.
Yep.
And so the mechanism is the same already. So that is not new. It's not being introduced here. It's mentioned here because it just needs to be mentioned here.
Yeah.
But it's already existing. It's already true. The town rarely, you saw how many claims we have for sidewalks. I'd say there's probably fewer times that the town has actually had to go and threaten to put a lien on somebody's property.
Yeah. And I do understand that. And I know that from code, but what I'm thinking of is like us going through and doing a survey. So, those are the two big unknowns for me. Is how much money is this going to cost? That makes me nervous. Because we haven't done a survey and I don't know how what's going to come back. And I think I feel like it's likely that there's a surge in this that's going to cause a number of priority and even that we're going to have to address. And so I think you know, well, maybe historically, we don't think we've seen that many. I think certainly in a proactive model, we're definitely going to be stumbling on a lot more.
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilman McCormick.
Yeah, I want to echo thank you to you and the staff, and thank you to everybody that's in the back there. I got to talk to you back in December. I think Councilman Johnson talked to you guys, and that's why it's in front of us now. So thank you very much for this. Okay, really, really great. Very happy with this overall, just off the front. But I do have a couple questions for you. So first is when talking about that surge, that was brought up earlier, right? So like we go to a proactive model, let's say we follow this as written today, and we find out that right now it sounds like the floor is somewhere around what we've historically spent, but 80K is really the number that we have in our budget. We're expecting that to be the floor, and it comes into some higher amount. Similar to infrastructure investment and capital plans, all I would say is the fix here today is worth it in the long run as well, right? Like there's a lot of liability issues that get solved as you talked about. And again, like the actual sidewalk maintenance itself, as we take a proactive, approach, if we were to pass this, a lot of that gets addressed as well, right? So I think regardless, this issue is going to come to a front anyway, right? So I think historically it's important to go through what happened. So let's walk through it real quick. So historically, when you were going through your research, Mr. Stevens, you told us over the last decade plus, that the town operated in a reactive manner. Essentially, a resident can call and say, I have an issue with the sidewalk, regardless of what the issue was, and the town would fix it. It could be something as simple as cosmetic. It could be something that meets these actual priority recommendations that you have today. But at the time, right, this was not policy, and therefore, basically, anybody could call in the town and go ahead and get this fixed. And then I asked Mr. Cochran, I said, hey, just historically, how many of these requests have you gone to that you action on, and how many have you not actioned on? And the answer was, we've actioned all of them. And then he made the caveat, but if we were to apply the policy we have now, there would have been one or two that we wouldn't have actioned. But essentially, as close to 100% of these would have been actioned and already have been actioned under the reactive model. Okay. That just tells me again, I think the floor and the proactive model are a little bit closer than maybe the fear that some folks have, right? And again, that's something we're gonna have to find out in the survey. But all I would say is, I do think this is financially prudent because historically we've already addressed 100% of the reactionary calls to include things we would not address with this current policy. And we have had it budgeted, and it's never been an item that's been discussed for the maneuvering of the fiscal money at the end of the year. Okay, so that's the historic context now. Now we have residents that are asking, can I get my sidewalk maintenance, right? And you being a diligent town manager and the instruction of this council and staff, we found, okay, what the code says does not match with the practice we are currently doing. And that led to a really fruitful discussion. And Councilman Johnson said, hey, just do what the code says. So you asked the question up front. Let me answer it for you. Is this simply an administrative fix that I'd be comfortable with you taking on and leaving the code the same, or changing the code? I want the code to reflect whatever the policy is. Okay, so that's just my statement there to answer your question. So now we have the historic context. Okay, now what are we going to do moving forward? I think we've already kind of talked about the surge issue, but let's talk about the cost share itself. So a priority hazard, right? Something that meets this requirement, the town's going to take 100% ownership of. And this is a best practice that we do see across the state of Maryland, Northern Virginia, Southern Delaware, where there are municipalities that take this on. So this isn't something new that that La Plata is just inventing or being the pilot for. This is something that has occurred before. And also the cost share, right? So when we spoke, the two things that were presented last week was 100% ownership by the town or 100% ownership by the homeowner, right? Or property owner, okay? Or commercial owner or whatever, but the property owner. And a couple of folks brought up the hybrid model. I'm really happy to see that when it comes to what I'll call a non-priority hazard or cosmetic issue with the actual sidewalk itself. So really, really glad to see that. Again, my biggest concern, a couple councilmen shared this, was that I didn't want a new cost to be given to the property owner or the homeowner, right? When we have already been enacting this policy to begin with. It doesn't match code, but it's what we've been doing. And I didn't want to take that away from the actual property owner. And I'm really glad to see that I think you've struck a happy chord here to start the discussion, right? Again, Councilman Gutenberg brings up a couple of really good edge cases again. And I think as we go through this, we're always just going to kind of find an edge case as we continue to move forward. But again, overall, I think the intent here matches exactly what we were discussing that night. So very happy about that as well. So we're talking about the actual permit pulls themselves over the last couple of years, and you mentioned that there were two issues, I guess, or you would say lawsuits, is that the correct term, that have been filed because of an issue? What were the two
There were
cases
two
that you were talking
reports.
about?
One resulted in an actual claim, and
Okay.
the other was just a report only.
Okay, two there. Under this, again, I think it's clear the definition of who the owner is going to be during those claimed cases. So again, thank you for addressing that issue as well. I know this council brought a lot in front of you, but I thought you did a really good job of laying that out. But that leads to a final question for you. I don't know if Mr. Cochran's better to answer it, but essentially, I'd be interested, as you're going through this survey and going through the town right now for where we stand, I do think it's imperative to look at the last, call it 5 years, 10 years. I don't know what's easiest for staff. But where have the permits been pulled that folks have done this work themselves? And where have we gone and been reactionary? Is that in your purview? Is that something you can do?
I can tell you, I think it'll be a quick search for permits.
Okay.
I think unless it's been a developer's coming in and doing some construction, there's probably hasn't been individual landowners pulling sidewalk repair.
Sure. So let me rephrase maybe. So the permit, I would argue there's got to be some sort of paper trail. Obviously, you pulled a permit. Let's say I called Mr. Cochran three years ago. And I said, I want you to come fix my side. I understand you weren't working here at the time, but let's say, hey, I want you to come fix my sidewalk, and you did. That's got to be tracked somewhere, right?
Hesitant to give you a response to that.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure about the record keeping down in Public Works. I know that a lot of what was done in the past and why we're in the position we are is because the town just would react and go fix things. So is there a way for us to piece together maybe invoices for concrete or materials and try and extrapolate what that means in terms of reactions? Probably, but as far as a ticketing system, Wilson, do you have a ticketing system that we could go back and look through years? Come all the way forward, because they won't be able to hear you on the recording. Make sure and.
Wilson Cochran, Public Works Director. We have a system, Dude Solutions, that we put work orders into. So anything from that point on would be captured. But I can tell you that one of the ones we just did had been on, we had emails going back, 3 years? So that they had been kind of putting the person off for 3 years, and we finally went out there and did it. So we really haven't had a whole lot that I've seen that we've actually gone out and done.
Okay. But again, I think it's important to really answer this question, because I think one of the things that's a secondary or tertiary impact to this policy is actually accomplishing equity for the town. And my concern is, as you look through this, is if somebody like, let's just say me, I read the code, I decide to fix the sidewalk myself, I take on that cost. I had no idea that I could have just sent a phone call a couple of years ago to get my sidewalk fixed. I think that's a big problem, right? So again, like making sure the code matches 100% is something I think needs to happen here, whatever the policy is that we want to enact. But I also think that's going to help with the historic question for the surge that we're doing now, right? Which is, if we go through the town, we find certain areas have sidewalks that maybe haven't been addressed, right? I think it's really good for equity to ensure that everybody's getting that treatment right off the rip, to ensure, hey, if you have a priority hazard, okay, the town is now addressing it. If you have an issue, it doesn't meet the requirements of a priority hazard, everybody's getting the option for a 50-50 split, or you can pay out of pocket yourself, do the permit if you think that's better for you. But again, it's fair across the board. And I think that's a really good direction for this council to take moving forward. So I just want to ask that question. If you have the ability to pull it, it'd be interesting. I think it's worth having a discussion on. If you don't, then I think the survey is going to do a good job of accomplishing that ask anyway. But again, I want to say very, very clearly, I would like the code to match the policy. I am happy with what's presented here. I'm okay if the council wants to go through and tweak a couple of pieces of language, but I think this meets the overall intent. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilman Sampson.
Yes, just a few things. First, I want to reiterate what Councilman Gutenberg stated, that I do think there should be something for the elderly or those on fixed income in policy that shows some form of a compassion or means for them. I do think that's important. I do agree that the action should be in the code. Policy and code should reflect. And then just 3 or 4 quick questions. When, barring something unforeseen, when will the actual survey actually take place? Projected out.
I'm doing everything I can to get it done, this fall at the latest. I mean, we're trying to get it done as quickly as possible. We ran into a challenge with, we don't have accurate records of our sidewalk network. And so unlike our road network, which we were able to move very quickly on, because we had fairly accurate records, we were able to move quickly on that. When it came to the sidewalks, when I asked Allison Robb, who's our GIS analyst, to pull up what she had, and we started going through it, it's just non-existent. So it's literally looking at like an aerial photo, and then she's mapping segments of sidewalk, and she's got to build that. She thinks it's going to take her about 2 weeks, and she's probably about a week into that. Then we'll get that off to the vendor. They'll give me a contract. I'll bring it in front of council. Ideally, if I can get that contract to you on the 25th, that'd be great. I'm not going to hold my breath. Probably a September meeting before I get that contract in front of you. But once we get the contract, this company has been very responsive. They've already driven our roads. They knocked that out. They did that in 2.5 days, got all of our roads surveyed. And so now they're crunching on data, and we'll be able to turn on that in a matter of weeks. So ideally this fall, that's when we're trying to get the sidewalk survey done and get the GIS layer built. And then we'll be able to look at all of it in a graphical display and know exactly, to Councilor McCormick's concerns about where are the hot spots, where are the need points across our town.
Okay, just 3 more quick questions. So is there any harm that you could foresee or increased liability risk to waiting till after the survey is done before proceeding further?
I don't see any, we're not assuming any more risk than status quo. I think it actually would benefit the town in any future litigation. The fact that we're having these conversations, we're having thoughtful conversations. I think these things would all play into the fact. So no, and I'm certainly not trying to put pressure on council to get this adopted anytime soon. I mean, I think there's already been enough comments tonight that we're going to have to go back and tweak this some more and come back to you at a future date.
Okay, just 2 more. And you probably can't answer this. I think it might be more for the Director of Public Works, but just looking out, once again, I say in general, if we move to this approach, do you think it will actually reduce the number of man hours? And the reason I'm asking is because if we're focusing on severe cases that are clear, taking care of that proactively, with cost sharing the others, do you think the man hours would be reduced than what we're doing now, just being reactionary to every call?
I think definitively long-term, yes, absolutely. There will probably be a surge of work initially as we identify things. And to be clear too, not all of the work has to be done by our staff. We wrote it in such a way that if we have a contractor or a vendor that we're using, you can still cost share that. The town would be executing that contract. The town would be performing that work via a third party. So liability would still be ours. The cost share would still be in play, but that may be a way where we don't necessarily spike the impact on the internal staff, but still get the work done.
Okay, and my last question, which is similar to the previous one, is do you see I guess the best way to describe it is a financial shock to the town initially? And what I'm thinking is, if we switch to a proactive model, then in my mind, what I envision is it's sort of like trying to pay, like it's like your car insurance. You can either pay it all at one time or spread it out. If we switch to a proactive, then we're actually seeking the severe items. And then in theory, your cost could go up initially, and then it'll taper off later on, but there could be an initial shock.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's a good thing. I think because what we're going to be able to do is we're going to start, this is going to enable us to start programming funding and performing proactive maintenance so that we're not being reactive. The longer you wait, especially on roads, the longer you wait to perform maintenance, the more costly it is. If you can repair a road early in its deterioration, you save money. Okay, so identifying it and getting in front of it and doing proactive maintenance is the desire. But yes, there is going to be an adjustment. But I said this last time, I'm not trying to fear monger or send shockwave. We will solve this in the budget. We'll figure it out. We'll come to you with a plan and a budget, that is responsible and is balanced, and it's going to allow us to get these things done.
Okay, that's all the question I had.
Councilman Johnson?
Yes, I have a few comments and some questions. One, the status quo is not okay. No matter how we sell it or what the reason was. I think this policy should only address residential. Should not be addressing commercial. I am also aligned on it being some type of code change that give the authority for the administrative policy and the process to lay it out. I am not a fan of the cost sharing approach. I think the hazardous is already, that's prudent and reasonable. But what is it going to say? I just wait or take a shovel and make it a little bit more inches higher than what it is. Now, with that cost sharing, I do think the council or should establish some type of fund where residents who meet a certain criteria can apply for funding to get the sidewalks done. I'm not a fan of the 50/50 cost sharing. I do recognize the need for it and the way the policy is written. But I'll go back and remind us over the last couple of conversations that we had about, and it might not be apples to apples, but it's still relevant. The mailbox conversation, right? The playground conversation, right? So what's next and what's not going to be next? And I think that's a really important question that council need to understand is if we're not going to be consistent in one area of the community, but consistent or not consistent in town-wide, that equity conversation is even more important. And staff, not to put you on the spot, but you drop the dime to turn around this policy really, really quick. There was nothing from the last two conversations that was brought to this council attention about one might believe the town was responsible. Obviously, that's a conversation that could be had that maybe we weren't responsible. Appreciate you with the turnaround work. It is very clear on what the axe is or what what should be considered and what options are on the table. I do recognize that. I don't know what the cost of replacing a sidewalk is, but I can tell you if I had a sidewalk in front of my house and I know it was cracking because cosmetically, and I know what the threshold is because it's black and white, I'm going to meet the threshold, right? So I think there's a lot of what ifs or what ifs, but I would just ask what comes next. The code is very clear on who's responsible for sidewalks in front of their property, notwithstanding who can afford what or what can be afforded. I think the solution for the cost sharing program should be the town establish some type of fund to address those concerns of affordability for a resident to get their repair, notwithstanding, taking the priority hazard out. I recognize if it's already there, let's just fix it. But the equity is very, it's a real conversation, especially from the past two examples that we had within the last 8 or 9 months that was presented before us in some way or form in conversation or email dialogue. Yeah, I appreciate the turnaround. I recognize the need for it. If we do go forward with it, I do believe it should be in code to give the authority to administer the policy and carry out the will. So that's all I have.
All right. So La Plata has said since 2017, since I've been here, and I'm sure it was much longer there, we want to be a walkable community. And that's what we're striving. You heard Councilman Gutenberg mention that tonight. So we want sidewalks. In the policy itself, it states sidewalks are essential components of La Plata's public infrastructure. We've heard a lot about inequity or you're talking about seniors who may not have the extra funding to fix a sidewalk. That shouldn't even be in consideration. What should be in consideration is equitable across the way. Just because someone has money and someone doesn't have money, they shouldn't be treated differently when it comes to sidewalks. You have people in this town that are on a corner lot, and their sidewalk is 3 times the size of their neighbors. Right there, there's an inequity. What do our taxpayer dollars pay? One thing that we haven't even mentioned is we have a dedicated fund now for sidewalks from the speed cameras. That money is going into sidewalk repair. So we've already gotten some funding. Now, is it a lot? I don't know. We'll have to look at that at the end of the year, but that one, the sidewalks, that was a dedicated one. And we've talked about the landlords and that, but ADA compliance. We should be in ADA compliance at all times, correct? Right, for when it comes to sidewalks. So when you have a sidewalk that is in disarray and you're putting it on the homeowner to fix it, that may delay that process even more. Who knows how long it will take for them to repair it? And it is the town's responsibility to ensure uniform, timely ADA compliance repairs across all neighborhoods. So there's a delay on that. The administrative cost alone from doing this, because you're going to have to seek out somebody you're going to have to go to the homeowner when they're not really, really bad, but they need to do that. There's a delay in that. I believe that we should not cost share at all. It should be the full responsibility of the town. And that addresses the questions about equity and safety and ADA compliance, fiscal responsibility. We have a healthy fund balance. Now, do we want to chip away at that? Absolutely not. But again, I go back to, and I had this conversation with several people at National Night Out. What do our taxes pay for? We're not asking them to shovel snow. We're not asking them to we are asking them to shovel snow. We're asking them to pick the weeds, but to repair, that is, if it's the fault of the resident, and I know that's going on in Pine Grove where there has been de-ice that was put on the sidewalks and has compromised the integrity of the sidewalk. I think that is a different issue. But for someone who moves here tomorrow and their sidewalk is in disarray, to have them have to pay 50%, I don't think that's the right thing to do. And again, I've heard this several times, the code should reflect that. The code should reflect it should be the responsibility of the town, in my opinion. So with that,
I need a follow-up comment because a couple things were brought up, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Councilman
So-
Gutenberg.
Yes, thank you. So first, Councilman McCormick talked about, shouldn't be a big deal based on past stuff. We got $80,000 in the budget and all of that. And Madam Mayor, you just talked about, it would be fair and equitable for everybody to just have their sidewalks paid for by the town. So let me just do some real quick what ifs for you to show you how quickly and why I say I'm concerned of not knowing an estimate from staff that would tell us about how much we're signing up for. So if 1 mile of sidewalk, a reasonable estimate at around $150 or $120 a foot, a linear foot, comes in at $750,000 a mile. So after this GIS survey is done, where we plug all of this together, we know we have dozens and dozens of miles of pipes, right? So I think it's a reasonable assumption before we have for the purposes of this discussion, but before we have the results of the survey, there could easily be 20 miles of sidewalk inside the incorporated town.
I think, just as a rough estimate, I think you can safely assume at least 75 miles. We had 30
Okay, well then even worse then, because I just did some math here to go at $750,000 a mile. 20 miles of sidewalk is $15 million. You're talking about a number 3 times that. So if we're talking about $45 million total recap cost, right, of sidewalk infrastructure. Making up another number, but let's just assume every 30 years, every single one of those miles of sidewalk has to be replaced. We have just signed up the town without even thinking about it to $1.5 million per year to do that recap of everything over 30 years. And people were very upset about a number 1/3 that when we were talking about people's retirement plans. So that's why I say I'm concerned about not knowing some of these answers. Now, if we're going to do a share program, whatever the risk is that we're going to show ourselves is going to be half that. But that number is still very large, $750,000 a year on average, if you're going to lay out a plan. I don't think our speed cameras are going to keep up with that number, right? So I don't think that's the answer. The other problem I have with the equity comment is that, you know, in many neighborhoods in La Plata, we have houses that are 700, 800,000, over $1 million. There's a few, but most of the houses are in the 400, 500, $600,000 range. And, you know, individually, there are, I know, cases where people are in distress, even living in houses of that size. However, this is the general fund we're talking about. So when we pay for police, we pay for them out of the general fund because it's really easy math to go, everybody benefits from that. I wonder how many houses in La Plata have sidewalks. I know mine doesn't. I mean, let's say 30% of the houses in La Plata don't have a sidewalk out in front of it. Those homeowners just got signed up to their individual property tax being hit with their fair share, and I use the term fair loosely, their fair share of that new liability that we're signing them up for. And I think this is a big reason why in many municipalities, the code that La Plata has today is more common than what we're talking about. Now, the things I think that are really good about what we're talking about here, though, these edge cases, right? Like these streets where there's no clear owner, that's places where the town's going to end up having to do that anyway. And so I think that element of this policy is really good. The part that still bothers me is what we're signing people up for liability and the loose definition of what equity and equitability is between different property owners. And I think when we're talking about being compassionate to people of very limited means by a certain definition is very different than saying it's a pain in the neck for somebody who has, you know, a 3-car garage with one in every bay plus golf carts. And, you know, I'm not as concerned about their ability to pay for their sidewalks where they have a corner lot that happens to be really big. They also benefit from that in the neighborhood they're in. The thing that people bring up to me more often when we're talking about sidewalks is the interconnectivity of neighborhoods, the ability to walk to shopping or the ability to get to a place that I have sidewalks in my neighborhood, but I can't leave my neighborhood. I got to get in my car to do that. And, you know, I sit here and I listen to all of this discussion and I wonder if that is the better place. If we're going to talk about the kind of capital investments that we're talking about in here over sidewalk repair, I start to think that that's a better place to go with that kind of money because it would make more of a difference for everybody, including the people that don't have sidewalks. And to the putting de-icer out kind of comment too. I mean, that makes a case to me of why you would go, I actually want a homeowner to have some skin in the game for how the sidewalk outside their home is treated because they share in the upkeep of that piece of infrastructure. If we just completely wipe that away, you know, we de-incentivize people taking care of that resource in the public right away is my thought. So I'll just leave it at that.
Councilman McCormick.
Yeah, Councilman Gutenberg, great comments. And yeah, there's a lot to think of. Again, the question before us is not a legislative piece or an actual policy directive, right? So again, to be clear, I think the code should reflect whatever the policy is that this council determines. And I don't think that's the case today, right? I think we've already proven that the practice that we have today goes against what the code has. And that's the big concern. Now, you bring up a good point with the numbers and the math. Again, what I'm saying is historically what's been presented so far does not make me concerned personally right now today. We have been reactionary to the point that anybody can call in for anything, to include sidewalk repairs that don't meet this threshold, and we have actioned them, and it has not been a budget concern. Now, if if Mr. Stevens and Mr. Cochran come forward and the numbers that you presented add up, of course I can't support that, right? So again, I want to say thank you for that. That's a really good comment. All I'm saying is with the information presented right now, we've solved 100% of the calls and complaints that have come in. We haven't said no to any of them, and it still hasn't met the threshold. That's all I'm saying there. So again, I'd like to see the numbers as well. I think I was clear on the 28th, and I want to be clear again. So really good comments. Really appreciate that feedback. That was great. I think it is important. I think there was a question to ask there, and I don't know if it got missed at the end. I hope it didn't, but I just want to bring it back up. That if this were to be a program that cost a significant amount of money, Mr. Stevens, and again, I would hope, present it to us and we would talk. And let's say this council decides not to action it and take another action. I think the connectivity of the sidewalks is something that I'll just frankly share. Over at Agricopia for National Night Out was something that 2 residents talked about as well. So that is an important thing to potentially talk about if the money for this doesn't make sense to talk about a future policy. So I just want to make sure that didn't get lost. I thought that was a really good point. But what I will say is what is presented right now in front of us, with the information that I have provided today, I think it makes sense for the council to take a position that it is important when it comes to sidewalk maintenance, and especially the safety piece, that we continue the practice that we currently have in place. And all I'm asking for is the actual status quo of the action and a change to policy. That's just my stance. All I'm asking for is the current action when it comes to priority hazards matches what we've already been doing. The change in action would be those that don't meet the priority hazard issue. And that would actually be a financial benefit to the entirety of the town, in that right now we take on 100% of the costs. With this policy, we would take on 50-50. And then there were a couple of comments that I think are legitimate about, well, if I'm a homeowner and I have a crack in my sidewalk that doesn't meet this requirement, I know how to make it meet that requirement. And all I would say is just remember the 5-letter word, fraud, right? This is something that I think the town can clearly action if this were to be a policy. And this is something that's clearly seen. And Mr. Cochran does his due diligence, and during the proactive fix, we identify that this is a, for lack of a better term, cosmetic issue in your sidewalk. And we come back a day later and there's a grenade-sized hole in your sidewalk. I think the police and the town, in accordance with obviously the laws and codes, could figure out what happened there, right? So all I would say is, again, let's just find out those numbers, because I think they're important. All I'm saying is historically today, with the info provided, it hasn't come close to an astronomical number. In fact, you brought that up on the 28th yourself. And then the final piece would be, let's say it comes out to be $1.5 million per year, anything like that, and the council decides to go forward with it. Let's just say they do. My hope would be, again, you will provide a budget as the town manager that would meet that intent with all the other policies that we have competing, right? And that's just how budgets work. So I totally understand that concern. I think it's something that we'll need to help make a decision. All I'm saying is today, what we're talking about and what I'm personally in favor of is having our code match the policy, right? And that's it. That's as simple as it is. So I thought you brought up great comments there. I think you've brought up a real concern that maybe I was flippantly looking at, but I take that feedback seriously. So thank you very much for your comments. I think those were really good. And the final piece with the equity comment itself. So 3 different council members made an equity comment. I don't think the feedback from those comments were about my equity comment. In fact, I actually agree with that, which is we have to be very careful that we have populations of this town paying for services that they may not benefit from, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say we go with the policy or the direction that we are only going to fix residential sidewalks. Well, if I'm an individual, and let's say the numbers are correct, and it's 30% of the town lives in an area that doesn't have a residential sidewalk, and we're not addressing commercial sidewalk, well, now I'm paying into a system, right, that maybe doesn't benefit me. And that's the equity conversation that I was just trying to bring up. So I think we're aligned there. I know there were other equity comments, but just want to make sure that that's addressed. So again, thank you for this. Thank you to the residents back there who brought this in front of us. Very important to have your feedback here. I support having the policy match or the code match what the current policy is when it comes to the priority hazards. And then the change would be the 50-50 ownership on the cosmetic issues, for lack of a better term.
Councilman Sampson, do you have anything? Councilman Johnson?
I do, yes. I'm really taken back by the example of equity when we're talking about what this mean in terms of cost sharing. I think I was very clear in my comments. Obviously, council will take whatever direction the majority believes is the best interest of the town. I would like to know, not tonight if you don't have it, if you do, great, how many sidewalk repairs have been done in the last 18 months in residential neighborhoods? To get a rest, I don't want to know the cost. I just want to know the number of what has been done.
Sorry.
That's fine. There's no need to answer right now if you don't have it.
We just, at the end of the last fiscal year, we had the money and we had a list of, I think, if I remember right, 10 projects that we did throughout the town. And we kind of waited for that. So what your comment earlier about if we have a big surge, the more you put together, usually the better price you get than doing one-offs here or there. So we kind of waited towards the end of the year and put them all in one big pot. And I think it was like 10 projects total. That's in the time. I've been here almost a year. So, and I don't think they did any the year before, if I remember right.
And all complaint based, correct? There was no, just all complaint based.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And my last comment would be, what do the taxpayer get for their tax money? I think we have a very clean, responsible budget. It's part of our job to continue educating the public on that civic lesson of what do you pay for with the shared service that we experience in this Republic of the United States of America, and the general fund. We can do everything we want. That's the glorious of government. But who's going to pay for it? And at the end of the day, what do the taxpayer get for it? It's going to be a higher tax bill on whatever programs we choose to fund or establish. So I appreciate the staff report and the direction that you provided and the feedback and all the data that you provided, not negating what you brought before us. I think there's a serious conversation that got to be had, and it started tonight. So I'll be looking forward to the future conversations, wherever that may be.
Thank you for that. And Councilman Gutenberg, you brought up a point where you said that you don't have sidewalks in your area where you live. But my counter to that would be when the kids go trick-or-treating and they go to a subdivision, they're using a sidewalk. When we visit other places, we're using sidewalks. It may not be in front of your house, but sidewalks are throughout the town. And they are used, unless you are homebound, you may encounter using a sidewalk coming through town. And I think that's very important. And we've had a great conversation about this tonight, but I think we're just still conjecturing because we don't have complete information. We've got a sidewalk survey that's coming out that could be in the fall. We have the big scary numbers that may be $45 million for repairs of sidewalks, and it could be literally nothing. So are we going to put something in our code that says it's going to be cost share? And it could be that $45 million, the scary number, do the math, half of that, that's going to fall on the homeowner. That is way out there. It will not reach that, but that is worst case scenario versus we may be spinning our wheels on this, trying to put something in policy that may never come to fruition. It may always be the responsibility of the town because when some sidewalk needs to be repaired, it falls in that category. So there's a lot of conjecturing, without the information that we need. We don't know how many miles of sidewalk we have. We don't know how the cost. And I know that your predecessor had a list that was like this long of sidewalk repairs. Now, were they cosmetic? Did they meet the criteria? But people call, as Mr. Stevens can attest to, people call when there is a little crack in their sidewalk and it's just cosmetically not appealing. It is not a hazard. It's still an ADA compliant. It is not a trip hazard. It just may not look really nice in front of their home. So lots of great information and questions from council today, but it is still to pass an ordinance based on what was presented to us tonight. I think that might be a little bit premature, that we get the information there. We don't know how much we paid in sidewalks. We don't know how many miles we have. We don't know how many are in disarray. But the code right now, as it stands, it does say that the homeowner is responsible for structural repairs, not replacement, structural repairs. And that's up for interpretation. I think a good court could argue either way. Is that your cosmetic? And that's where the town says it doesn't meet this? Is it a hazard? So I think we probably need more information to make a solid decision on this.
Okay, so if I can maybe read this back to you, here's what I would propose. It sounds like council wants to wait until we actually conduct the survey and then come back with some more quantifiable information. We can also work up costs for panel replacements. Do you happen to have off the top of your head a panel replacement for a sidewalk? Okay, because I think the numbers that you're referencing are for new construction. Repair is going to be different. We owe you that. Okay, but I can certainly do that, and we'll table this conversation, bring it back at a future date once I have more information. Not a problem. In the meantime, here's what I would propose. Over the course of 2 different conversations, there hasn't really been any concern about the standards that staff is introducing. So we're still in this gray area where our code is very clear. And it says that the abutting property owner is responsible for the structural repair. But we have our practice, which is significant, of the town has been taking on repairs. So what I'd like to do is I would like from today forward until we get final resolution on this, to use the standards that we have. And if it's a public safety hazard, a priority hazard, according to the standards, the town will go out, we'll get it on our list and we'll get it fixed, just as we have been doing. If it falls below that standard, for now, I'd like to just table that work, document it until we get resolution on what the town wants to do.
Okay.
So
Can I-
staff will respond, staff will go out.
For discussion, can I add one caveat to that? I agree with what you said within the budget that we've allotted. Within the 80, with the budgets that's there, and if what you come up with exceeds that, then obviously we come back here and we talk about how to address it.
And that 80,000 number again is inflated for this budget because I got to pay for the survey. So I think last year's number was 55. So and we
Okay.
spent 35. There you go.
So with what Mr. Stevens just proposed, I'm looking for, as long as it's within budget, I'm looking for consensus to give him direction to proceed that way. Councilman Gutenberg,
Yes.
Councilman McCormick,
Yes.
Councilman Johnson, Councilman Sampson,
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
No.
All right, and I am a yes as well. So if it is a public safety hazard, it is addressed immediately, as under our terms that we are currently doing, that we have been doing. If it's not, if it's just the structural repair, we hold off on that until we can, and then if I've heard this, if I've captured this correctly too, it is the will of the council to get more information, or we were looking for how many miles, the cost, just so we are informed on and how many areas need immediate attention. So I think that would make at least a more informed decision.
If I could just add, my assumption is, based on the way you described it, I agree. I think I understand it the same way, but the action that we just took a consensus on applies to this year right now. So you're basically using budget this year to fix priority by that definition cases. And then if we do nothing, it reverts to code is code. If we do something based on the analysis and the information we get, then that becomes the thing. But if we do nothing, code is code.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. So it brings us to off-road vehicles. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, off-road vehicles. So some background here, going back to, it was a May meeting on the 17th. Councilman Gutenberg brought this up. And going through your agenda item summary. Starting with the background, the town has experienced a documented and increasing pattern of single riders and small groups operating unlicensed and unregistered dirt bikes, mini bikes, and all-terrain vehicles, or ATVs, on town streets, sidewalks, parks, and other public property. This activity creates unsafe conditions for pedestrians, motorists, and operators alike, and detracts from the quality of life town residents expect in public spaces. While Maryland Code Criminal Law Article 6-405 already makes it a misdemeanor to operate an off-road vehicle, or ORV, on property owned or leased by the state or a political subdivision, traditional roadside enforcement of this conduct is impractical. Attempting to stop moving ORVs, particularly when operated in groups, creates a pursuit-related risk of injury to the public and to operations that the town is unwilling to accept. This dynamic has made it difficult for the town to enforce the existing state prohibition through conventional means. On May 17th, Councilman Gutenberg submitted a matter of discussion, agenda item requesting that the council direct staff to prepare an ordinance establishing a tiered notice-based enforcement framework, one that shifts the point of enforcement from the moving vehicle to the storage and possession of the unregistered ORV, and that holds owners and, where applicable, parents or guardians accountable after formal notice of a documented violation. The discussion memo drew on comparable enforcement models already in place under Baltimore City Code, Prince George's County Code, and Queen Anne's County Code, as well as the state fuel point of sale signage requirement under the Maryland Code Business Regulation Article 10-503. At its June 9th, 2026 meeting, Town Council reviewed this proposal and directed the town manager to prepare a draft ordinance for council consideration that balances public safety needs with the property rights of town residents. Consistent with that direction, staff has prepared ordinance 26-17, which prohibits ORV operation on public property townwide, consistent with Maryland Code, criminal law, and authorizes impoundment of unregistered ORVs found in motion on public ways under Maryland Code, Transportation Article 13-402. It establishes a prior warning notice process under which the possession or storage of an unregistered ORV becomes a civil nuisance violation only after a documented incident of illegal public operation and a formal notice to the owner or guardian. It holds parents and guardians civilly accountable for knowingly permitting or facilitating a minor's illegal operation of an unregistered ORV, including a rebuttable storage presumption following notice. It prohibits retail fueling of unregistered ORVs present as a result of illegal public road operation consistent with the state signage mandate under Business Regulation Article 10-503. It sets strict release protocols for impounded vehicles, title verification, photo identification, and an administrative nuisance fee with unclaimed vehicles deemed abandoned after 45 days. It extends registration and licensing standards to throttle-driven electric vehicles that exceed Class 2 low-speed electric bicycle limits, closing a regulatory gap created by the growing prevalence of high-speed electric off-road vehicles, and establishes an administrative appeal process through the town manager's office with judicial review available in the circuit court for Charles County. The ordinance is intended to supplement and not supersede applicable state law and is to be construed consistently with the Maryland Annotated Code throughout. The fiscal impact, no direct appropriation is required to adopt the ordinance. Implementation will involve staff time for notice preparation, service, and administrative hearings in coordination with the town's designated towing and storage vendor. Costs associated with towing, storage, and impoundment are intended to be offset by the administrative nuisance fee and towing storage charges collected from vehicle owners at release, which will be established by a companion resolution setting the town's annual fee schedule. Strategic plan alignment. This ordinance advances goal number 1, good governance, by establishing a measured, graduated, and legally grounded enforcement framework that reflects the town's role as a responsible steward of community trust, balancing protection of public safety and quality of life with due respect for residents' property rights, consistent with the town's commitment to fair and transparent decision-making. Your sustainability and ADA considerations are in your packet. And the recommended action this evening is adopt ordinance 26-17, chapter 181, vehicles and traffic, creating a public nuisance, unregistered off-road vehicle enforcement and accountability code by amending chapter 181 of the town code with an effective date of August 27th, 2026. And that's all I have for you, pending the questions.
Thank you. So my biggest hope with this is that we actually achieve the goal, right, which is to reduce the number of complaints ultimately, and to avoid what I think is likely the inevitable outcome of these kinds of vehicles operating on our streets. I know that the night we last talked about this, it didn't happen in La Plata, but it happened in Charles County. Just a few miles from here, there was a young person, I think in their early 20s, who was killed on an unregistered off-road vehicle, a dirt bike, operating on a county road. And that's what we, I think all of us want to avoid that with an ordinance like this. So it's a question, but it doesn't have to be answered tonight. Like what I would want to do, sometime down the road, is be able just to look into our stats on, and I don't know if that's, if these types of violations are recorded in a way in the state database where I can easily go search them, or if the police department needs to just include that in their data, if not asking for some new set of info on it, but at some point I'd like to make sure that like the things that we're doing this kind of work on are done in a way where we're achieving the goals, the outcomes that are intended are coming from them.
Just in the most recent monthly reports, I have been putting the mini bike complaints in there. They're classified as mini bike complaints by the sheriff's office database. So when you see them on there, I think the previous month we had 0. This past month we had 5. So they are accounted for as far as complaints, but there's no enforcement activity on it as of yet.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's all.
Councilman McCormick.
Yeah, thank you. I said on May 17th, but this is I think, very interesting and very good proposal for the overall health and benefit of the town. I'm famous for sanding edges off. I want to sand a couple edges off. So Mr. Stevens or Councilman Gutenberg, you guys might be the best person to answer this. Today in Maryland, there is a process to go ahead and register off-road vehicles, correct?
Not off-road vehicles. You can convert the off-road vehicle into a roadworthy vehicle, such as like if you have a dirt bike and it's over a certain amount of cc's, it has to have a brake light, a headlight, and be
And a
registered.
license plate, correct? That's all-
Correct.
Okay. And then there was a discussion that night. I know the answer. I just want to be clear. So anybody who's best qualified to answer this, let's say I buy a golf cart. I go ahead and I make sure it's registered properly. There is a process with the state to go ahead and ensure that that is street legal, for lack of a better term.
There is, but it's typically based on local ordinances that would allow it. Under normal circumstances, it's not allowed by Maryland law to be driven on roadways.
Understood.
But in certain jurisdictions, it is allowed for places that have speed limits less than 30 miles per hour. And it has
Yep.
to usually have to have some kind of safety restraints in them as well. So
Yeah, and you touched on it, which is basically the community itself can decide that, right? For example, a really good example, a golf community that's gated and meets those requirements can go ahead and have an ordinance self-contained that allows for those vehicles to be operated on the road.
I want to say Cobb Island, maybe
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
And I know Colonial Beach in Virginia is that way.
Yeah, and the reason I bring it up is, again, this is, I think, a really good document to address exactly those KPIs, key performance indicators that we're talking about. Complaints for sure, right? But more importantly, the safety of our residents. And again, I'd be very interested to see if there is a breakdown between folks that are operating registered vehicles in these correct areas, right? Off-road converted to on-road, versus folks that are just operating off-road vehicles that break ordinance or state law or county law, et cetera. So again, really great to give you a forcing mechanism. You mentioned it yourself in your report. Right now, there's really no metric on that because that forcing mechanism is being addressed through this ordinance here. So again, thank you, Councilman Gutenberg, for the legwork here. Thank you to the staff for the quick turnaround, and I'm excited to see what we can do here to ensure our community stays safer. So thank you for this.
Councilman Sampson. Councilman Johnson.
Yes, two things. Thank you for the quick turnaround. This ordinance does not address the golf cart conversation that was had. It was very brief on whenever we had this conversation. And to your point, I only said it because I see the word it addressed throttle driven, right? That's pedal driven. So we can get back to that in a second. I could be wrong. Right now, Councilman McCormick, the town of La Plata does not have an ordinance in place that allows golf carts to operate on public roadways. It's something that very well could be done.
Correct. And that's what I'm getting at right now. The town could, we just haven't. And this isn't something new that, I've seen comments that this is a boogeyman type document. I don't think that's the case.
Yes.
That's what I was bringing up.
Sure. And because I have a lot of conversation with my friend Councilman Gutenberg, obviously the end of this is not to go and pound somebody's vehicle, but the end result is one less fatality should it get to that, or a serious injury. I think probably just 3 weeks ago, across the bridge in Fairfax County, it was a tragic accident of a kid riding a scooter in a roadway like he normally does every day, and crossed the roadway without yielding, whatever that means to a 7-year-old, right? And lost his life. So the end result is to make sure that we are being responsible, or really to put ownership on the parent and guardian to be responsible with your child operating an off-road vehicle. Because I don't think any of us want to be notified, or any member of the community want to be a neighbor or a witness to a kid getting struck and seriously injured by a vehicle by any means, whatever they're doing, operating a dirt bike, operating a golf cart, or just on their scooter, going up and down St. Mary's Avenue. It's dangerous, right? So I think the intent of this, or I know the intent of this, is to preserve public safety, right? Like in your staff report, we're not asking that the police department take a stricter enforcement on chasing cars up and down Charles Street or dirt bikes up and down Charles Street to stop people from riding dirt bikes. I think they might enjoy that and keep doing it, right? The point of it is to have some type of accountability mechanism. And when I take your toy from you, it's an inconvenience, right? So it's well written. I appreciate the quick turnaround, and I think you was going to address the golf cart.
Yeah, because there was a conversation about carts, and it's already come up twice now tonight. So put a lot of thought into trying to craft the language around this. So on the third page of the ordinance, on page 97 of your packet is where you're going to find this language. So it defines, in the definitions of the ordinance, it defines the off-road vehicle or ORV, and it lays that out. And then it goes on to say, the term includes dirt bikes, mini bikes, ATVs, four-wheel drive vehicles used in an unregistered capacity, amphibious machines, and ground effect or air cushion vehicles. The term does not include, and then it has 4 bullets underneath that. So the term off-road vehicle does not include. And the 4th bullet reads, motorized lawn equipment or golf carts operated for their designed purpose on private property. So I think we get to it. So if you have a golf cart and you're operating it at the golf course, you're okay.
What golf courses in the town of La Plata?
Well, I'm not trying to address that. There may be one in the future, right? And so that's okay. So it's, and I put motorized lawn equipment in there too, because I'm seeing those things driving all over the roads, right? So tried to address it. If I didn't hit the mark, let me know. We'll go back and tweak it, but just let me know.
Thank you. I thought this was well written. The only thing that I would address is code enforcement, because it says or. Now, we know what the intent is. I'm thinking 5 years, 10 years down the road, when maybe all of us have changed out and we're not sitting here with the knowledge of this being created. There's 2 areas where it says law enforcement or code enforcement officers. And one is in the section 181A, the authority to impound. Well, that would be code enforcement. That would be absolutely, they can write that up with the assistance of the police. But the one that concerned me a little bit was where it says the phrase found in operation or in motion. I don't want to see some new hot dog code enforcement officer coming in thinking that he can chase an ORV because of the way that the language is written in here, that it says law enforcement officer or it says code enforcement officer. It needs to be crystal clear that they are not to pursue. They are only there as almost as administrative resource in that they will go to the court, they will issue the tickets. But if there's a vehicle in motion, in operation, that is not clear because it says or code enforcement officer.
Mr. Stevens, how many high-speed chases has the code enforcement officer had in La Plata over the past year that you've been here?
I've been here 8-0. But
Okay.
But I don't
mean,
think they've had this ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is really splitting hairs in a ridiculous way. And I think the golf cart discussion and this nuanced word "or" is an unfortunate sideshow to what's actually being done here. So, I mean, is there anyone here who's for the disenfranchised golf cart drivers in La Plata that's in the audience, or maybe could email me if they're seeing this on YouTube? I would love to talk about that. What we've done here is good, and it is based on existing code in 3 other jurisdictions. It's gone through legal review. I do not think that town policy allows for a code enforcement officer to interpret this as he can turn a yellow light on a Ford Ranger and chase a kid on a scooter. I mean, I
don't think you could.
don't see it.
I don't think you
Uh,
can legislate good
Please be
judgment.
recognized.
I don't think you can legislate good judgment. There you are.
Okay, but please still wait to be recognized. It is just to make sure it is clear. That was my thought. And no, we haven't had anybody here. I'm sure that our code enforcement officer probably would not do that, but right here, it gives them the authority, or it may need just a word in there for clarity. But that is, the intent is awesome. I love this ordinance, except for that one area is ambiguous.
It was my interpretation of it that the police would not be chasing these either. So code enforcement wouldn't be expected to chase them. The whole purpose of this is so we eliminate the pursuit tactic of trying to identify these folks, whereas we would take a more passive route in observing where they're going without chasing them, because that's the whole purpose, to eliminate the whole chase aspect, because that's when more folks get injured and hurt. That's why most agencies have no chase policies on it to begin with.
Absolutely. Maybe that needs to be in there because it says found in operation or in motion. So it's operating, it's in motion.
That's just an observation.
Okay, so you see that. How do you get to the final result that you ticket them? You have to follow them, I would assume.
Either follow or just, I mean, we have cameras, we have the drone program. I mean, these are going to be well thought out operations, obviously. I mean, we don't have drones as first responders right now to where we if we get that complaint, we can shoot one up in the air and have it follow where it goes. But that would be in my plans for the future in some manner. So.
But you just said you would follow them. I don't know how fast they go. I don't know if it's a high speed pursuit, but one option is to follow them. And if you give the same, according the way the code is written, or the ordinance is written, if you give the same latitude to the code enforcement officer, would it not be reasonable that he follows or she follows them to make sure that they receive the same information, that they're able to process this
I understand what you're saying, but when I say follow, it's more observe at a safe, safe distance. You're not pursuing them in any way. If you're trying to catch up to them, you're pursuing them. So if they're making any evasive actions and we continue to follow them, then it becomes a pursuit, which is what we're trying to eliminate.
And to a layman, reading this, it does not say that, it does not say pursuit. That is your language, that means your end result is probably going to be a stop, right? So you're pursuing someone. Follow is maybe different, but I just wanted to make sure that it's crystal clear to protect the town, protect the police, and protect the code enforcement officers so that they know what they are allowed to do and not allowed to do. That is my 2 cents on there. All right, any other comments?
Are you making a motion to amend this? Is that?
I did not make that motion.
Okay.
But I would like clarification on it. I am not happy of the way that it reads right now, and I actually do have, so you know what, Councilman Berg, I am seeking, let me ask Mr. Stevens on this first before I make any type of motion. So you've heard my concern, and it probably, again, is nothing. It is your direction to your chief. It is your direction to your code enforcement officer at this time and moment. Then it becomes an ordinance, and you're not here. Ordinances can be changed, obviously, but what is your thought?
Well, my thought, Madam Mayor, is that this really gets into the nuance of statutory construction. So when I look at section 181-43, paragraph A, which is what you're referring to, where the authority is vested in the law enforcement and code enforcement officer, it's saying that the authority to impound is granted here in this paragraph. And then it says, last few words of that paragraph, under any of the following circumstances. And then it goes on to define the violations of the code that would then trigger paragraph A. Okay?
Yeah.
So it says that ORB is found to be in operation or in motion. That is a violation of the code. That is a condition that if it is broken, could trigger the impoundment. So I'm not an attorney. Statutory construction is something I'm learning and studying. I don't think it necessarily, I do not believe that the way it's written right now gives or empowers either law enforcement or code enforcement to pursue or follow or detain or anything with regard to a vehicle in motion. I think those 3 bullets under paragraph A are defining the behavioral conditions that trigger the violation of the ordinance.
Okay. This ordinance is very important, and I'm not going to be the one to hold it up, but I do want, for the record, I don't like the "or" on there because I want to not only protect the police, but I also want to protect our code enforcement officer and the town. But with that said, you sound very confident in that, Mr. Stevens, in that it's not going to have one of those new code enforcement officers feel like they are empowered to enter into a pursuit of this, as long as it is clear from top down. I like the legal words to say exactly what it means to make it crystal clear.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, when you put this ordinance together, I'm assuming you ran it by our town attorney?
Correct.
Okay, what did he say?
He said it's legally sufficient.
Thank you.
Oh, I figured as much, but sometimes we pick, we pick apart. All right, we're looking for a consensus to move this forward to legislation. Councilman Goodberg,
Yes.
Councilman McCormick,
Yes.
Councilman Sampson,
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well with my notations on the record. All right, moving on to our next one, fiscal year 2026 budget amendment.
Okay, all right, council. During FY 26, the town undertook a broad review of operational, contractual, and infrastructure needs to ensure the budget accurately reflects current service demands and expenditure patterns. Similar to FY 25, adjustments are necessary to align funding with actual activity, particularly within information technology, facilities maintenance, emergency preparedness, property insurance allocations, and departmental contracted services. The FY 26 changes reflect the town's continued effort to modernize systems, respond to evolving operational requirements, and ensure program costs are accurately distributed across benefiting departments. And you'll remember, we had this same presentation last year, and what changed as we went through the budget together last year, you started seeing language in the resolutions that said this may require a budget amendment. We tried to start calling that out to you in advance when you were adopting those resolutions, so that when we got to today, those changes wouldn't be as much of a surprise as they were last September when we were still working through this process for the first time together. So the fiscal impact, the FY 26 budget reassignments and amendments result in no net increase to the overall general fund budget. All expenditure increases are fully offset through reallocated appropriations, corresponding revenue adjustments, or reserve fund allocations. These actions maintain a structurally balanced budget while ensuring financial transparency and proper expenditure classifications. The analysis, so starting with information technology in FY 26, there were significant adjustments to support IT infrastructure needs, including funding for unbudgeted support services and computer hardware for both the IT department and police department. These changes addressed system reliability, modernization requirements, and planned upgrades initiated through council resolutions. General services, newsletter-related expenditures were realigned to ensure print, postage, and delivery costs are accurately reflected within the appropriate service areas. Emergency preparedness, additional funding was allocated to support under-budgeted siren maintenance and related operational needs, ensuring readiness for community alert and safety systems. Property insurance, adjustments were made across departments to correctly distribute property insurance costs, aligning premium allocations with actual department use. Facilities management, FY 26 incorporates updates due to deferred projects and reallocation of funds to support facility oversight that supports street and park maintenance operations. The budget changes also reflect a reappropriation for an unplanned roof replacement and preparation of town-owned rental properties, ensuring that they meet safety and usability standards before occupancy. Additionally, there is an appropriation for police department security cameras funded by the project reserves. Inspection services and developer activities. Amendments adjust both expenditures and revenues related to inspection activity, including increases for building inspection services, build and updates to developer-related service fees to ensure accurate cost recovery. Additionally, there is a budget amendment for future billings of inspection service expense due to the change in the fee collection process for inspection services for revenue that has already been received. Public safety. FY 26 includes an appropriation for police department replacement of a cruiser funded through insurance reimbursement. State, federal, and local grants, grant appropriations support commercial vehicle enforcement, DWI, DUI safety operations, HIDA, that's the high intensity drug trafficking, something association, agency enforcement activities, and farmers market programming reflecting ongoing use of multi-agency funds dedicated to community safety and development. These adjustments reflect actual service demands, correct cost allocations, and ensure compliance with the adopted resolutions. The strategic plan alignment, sustainability, and ADA considerations are in your packet. This evening, staff recommends that the council approve the FY 26 budget reappropriations and amendments as presented to ensure accurate financial reporting, alignment of expenditures with service activity, and compliance with applicable resolutions and fiscal policies. And I'm joined by the town treasurer. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Right, I'll open up the floor. Councilman Goodberg.
No, it makes sense to me. I have no questions. Thank you. I appreciate the information and the data provided with it.
Councilman McCormick?
No, I sent you my three questions earlier. They were adjacent to this. He answered all three. Thank you very much.
Councilman Sampson? Councilman Johnson?
Yes, I have questions. I see some of the outlines were, approved through council resolution. I'm going to assume those are like major expenses, vehicles, et cetera. I get that. And like the other one, I'm guessing just balancing the cost center where certain funds are coming from or
Yeah.
what?
So sometimes some funds don't use as much, like there was that roof replacement that was unexpected, while other funds, or not funds, sorry, departments didn't use that area, so we just move them around. And then there's other areas like for the planning department where we have developer costs, we were billed for them,
Mhm.
and then we are reimbursed for them. Well, that wasn't in the budget, but it shows the revenue coming in and the expense associated with
Okay.
it.
So is it, obviously it's common practice because we've done it 2 years in a row to wait until the end of the fiscal year to do one whole amendment?
Yes, or I would be bringing things and things change. So it's best to just do this evaluation at the end of the year.
Okay.
End of fiscal year.
So my last question is, you talk about like department to department and the charter is clear on how funds are appropriated and how transfers happens. What is your interpretation of major funds? Is it anything over $20,000? Would that be safe to say?
Well, that's when you're talking about major funds, are you talking about general?
Excuse me, sorry. So any transfer of funds between major appropriations for different purposes, like, do you consider that to be anything over $20,000? Like, let's just say, the police department didn't use something, but we used it in another department. How do we?
It's not based on amount. So in our code, departments, we look at, the departments are not supposed to be over budget by their expenditures. So the expenditures are based on the department. So if a
Mhm.
department's over budget for one reason or another, unexpected, and another department is under budget, we just move those around as long as they're in the same fund. So it's taking that pot of or that expense that was budgeted, maybe in one department, and move it to another department, as long as it's within the fund, so the
Yes.
general fund.
So we're looking at major appropriation as general fund versus enterprise fund.
No, so it's not a major appropriation.
Oh,
It's
the
just
charter
a-
defines.
No, it's a reappropriation of funds. And in it, we are supposed to make sure our departments are balanced or are not over budget. So sometimes there's a department that might be under budget and we just move those funds. And I try to keep it to a point where, okay, was it contracted services? So I move it from like Public Works had that contracted services for 90,000 for an engineer that was never used. But then the facility manager was budgeted for capital projects and we didn't have that in there. So I moved that contracted services to
Okay.
cover it.
Yeah.
It's not based on it's based on making sure that the departments are not over budget and we just reappropriate it within the same fund.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. Not to overcomplicate this, and I don't need to answer tonight. Can you give me a definition of what staff believes is a transfer of funds between major appropriation for different purposes? As it relates to the charter, when you talk about transfer funds, it don't have to be answered tonight, just from my understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you, are you
Yeah.
looking at the chart?
Yeah, so C8-8,
CA.
8,
Oh,
number
C-
8 dash number 8.
Okay.
I just want to know, like, what is the interpretation of
Yes,
major
we will-
funds?
We will define that, and get that back to you via email before close business this week.
Thank you.
One other thing that you might be referring to is where we budget for costs that the general fund has that's reimbursed from the enterprise funds. And that is budgeted based on actual costs of like our billing coordinator. Their expense is completely in the finance department, but
Mhm.
that supports the enterprise funds.
Okay.
So we make in the budget, we have the enterprise funds pay the general fund, and it's an expense to the enterprise fund and a revenue to the general fund.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and I have no comments, so I will entertain a consensus. I will look for a consensus to move this forward to legislation. Councilman Gutenberg.
Yes.
Councilman McCormick.
Yes.
Councilman Sampson.
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Brings us up to matters of information. Mr. Stevens.
Council, if you'll recall, there was an invitation extended to the mayor to participate in a local leaders cohort that MDOT was hosting. Serious About Safety was the broader program. This council met and nominated Counselor Gutenberg. I then communicated that back to the state, and then the state replied that the invitation that had been extended was non-transferable. I communicated that email to council. I just thought that it was important that I bring this back this evening, because when we last left this conversation, anybody who had been watching that meeting would have left that meeting believing that the council had nominated Counselor Gutenberg, and there would be an expectation that Counselor Gutenberg would be the representative. However, when I sent that communications to the state, they came back and said that the nomination was not transferable. So I wanted to put this on the agenda this evening, just to be clear that expectation, if you had that expectation, that was not going to be met. The item in the staff report is purely just a chronology of my communications with the state on the topic.
All right. On to legislation.
Well, comments, please.
Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, yes, please.
Councilman Johnson?
Thank you for bringing this back. You know, the chronological events is as we know it. And it's hard not to be cynical, but when we become cynical in government, bad things happen. So just a very plain question to you, Mayor James. Council took action that night to participate in the cohort. We took action to nominate Counselor Gutenberg. And then I don't know if it was the following day or 2 days later, whatever it was. Did you have any communication to MDOT staff to have them resend the invitation to the town of La Plata?
No,
All right, perfect. Thank you.
I did not ask them to resend.
Was there any communication with them about the nomination?
That's not the question you asked.
My question was, did you have any communication to MDOT that would lead them to resend the invitation?
I cannot speak for MDOT.
Did you have communication with MDOT afterwards?
Yes, I did.
So was it contrary to the decision that council made that night?
It was not.
Okay, very well. Thank you.
All right, moving on. Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Stevens, so going through this report real quick, and I apologize if it isn't here. I just reread it again. I read it obviously before the meeting. Once MDOT gives you this, I guess you would say like rescinding the invite or whatever the terminology is, did you ask for a reason why? And then did you explain, because this document, and I'm getting nitpicky here, states that we nominated Councilman Gutenberg, which is partially true. He was also appointed to the role. So it wasn't just simply a nomination as second. There was a 4-1 vote. He is the council's will is for Councilman Gutenberg to be the rep here. Did we ask for follow-up why that was changed? And then is the town staff, like, is your position when you're talking to them like, hey, the council's rep is Councilman Gutenberg, and that's how La Plata is going to operate moving forward?
So I did. I followed up with my point of contact, the staff person that I've been communicating with at MDOT. And I asked that question. I said, you know, what can give me some insight as to why the invitation is non-transferable using their language. What they expressed was a desire to have a representational spread across, I think it's a small cohort of 12 to 15 people. And they wanted so many mayors, so many council members. That was the answer that they gave me to that question.
Okay, and I'm not trying to put you in a tough spot. Maybe this conversation did or didn't happen. And I saw that in the report, right? So listen, we got a spread of 12 to 15. Let's just say, for example, it's councilor heavy and we really want, you know, a mayor from a town to represent. Did you make a statement or any sort of, I guess you would say, stance from the town that was not reflected in that meeting or that vote? And what I mean by that is, did you say, okay, then La Plata is going to participate and Mayor James will be the rep? Or did you say, okay, well, the town's out? Or did you say the town's going to wait? Like, what was the response to this? Because I guess I'm confused, which is MDOT's rescinded the invitation, right? They're asking for a rep. This council hasn't nominated that rep. Where are we at?
I certainly didn't take a stance about what the town of La Plata was going to do. At the time that I spoke to the staff representative, I said, I think that there's going to be some follow-on communications that come from this.
Okay.
Because I explained that this council is, took a formal action in a public meeting to nominate the representative, and now they're going to be told that they can't. So I said, I think you can expect that you're going to receive communications on this matter. I don't think it's done, but I certainly didn't presume to take a position on what this council was going to do moving forward.
Okay, and then there was a exchange, Councilman Johnson asked a question essentially, hey, was there any communication with MDOT from Mayor James? And Mayor James said, yes, there was communication. I guess I would just ask, like, again, I don't think that's ceremonial. I don't know why the mayor would be communicating with MDOT directly, so I'll just leave it there.
All
Look,
right.
If I could just real quick, right? Like just so there's, thank you. So just so there's no confusion, right? Like clearly the MDOT rep understood that we, by a rule of procedures, we're going to nominate some member of the 5-member council to serve on the cohort. And it was clearly okay with them. They communicated that in a phone call with you, Mr. Stevens, and they also followed that up with an email that said the same. And so the part that's confusing about this is that after doing what they agreed we could do, and us just doing the simple act of following through without any other prompting other than hearing the result of what we did, some less than 72 hours later, the stance was changed and they wanted to revert to a different approach. And so that is, I did reach out to MDOT myself, to the appropriate folks over there, to ask for some explanation of that, because the explanation that was given is not really satisfying. And honestly, with the layout of the chronology here, there's really only one conclusion that you can come to, is that, to me, and I'm waiting for MDOT's, response. And so, I'll take that for what it is when I do get it. But it is hard to not be a little cynical about this, that the thumb was put on the scale here, and something was done to revert something that we all voted on. And if that's the case, it's really disappointing, is all I'll say. So, I think there's a little time before it is MDOT's party, and they set the rules for it. So they're, whatever approach they're taking to this is the approach they're taking to this. And so I am hoping to hear from them, this week, I would hope, based on when I sent my inquiry to them, and I shared that inquiry with the members of council, just so they were understanding that I was communicating on my own behalf, but about an action that the council took. And so, I guess I'm looking forward to hearing back the explanation in hopes that it's, somewhat more satisfying than what we've gotten to date. And I'll just leave it at that.
All right, thank you. Moving on to legislation. First, is ordinance 26-16, amendment to the town for the fiscal year 2027.
Okay, this is ordinance 26-16, amendment to the town of Plato fiscal year 2027 financial plan / budget, reclassification of a position. This is the second reading for consideration of adoption. This is an ordinance concerning amendment to the town of Plato fiscal year 2027 financial plan / budget, reclassification of a position for the purpose of amending the town of Plato fiscal year 2027 financial plan / budget to reflect the reclassification of a position in the Public Works Department and all matters generally relating thereto.
All right, do I have a motion to adopt ordinance 26-16 as presented?
So move.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion carries. This brings us to the first reading of ordinance 26-17, chapter 181.
Okay, this is ordinance 26-17, chapter 181, vehicles and traffic. This is the first reading for introduction. This is an ordinance concerning chapter 181, vehicles and traffic, for the purpose of creating a public nuisance, unregistered off-road vehicle enforcement and accountability code by amending chapter 181, vehicles and traffic, to provide definitions, operational prohibitions, notice-based nuisance enforcement, parental and guardian responsibility, fuel point of sale restrictions, impoundment and release protocols, and administrative appeal process and penalties, and all matters generally relating thereto.
Thank you very much. Brings us to ordinance 26-18.
Okay, this is ordinance 26-18, fiscal year 2026 budget amendments and reassignments, fiscal closeout. This is the first reading for introduction. This is an ordinance concerning the town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 budget amendments and reassignments, fiscal closeout, for the purpose of amending the town of La Plata fiscal year 2026 FY26 financial plan/budget and all matters generally relating thereto.
Thank you very much. Brings us to resolution 26-48.
Okay, this is resolution 26-48, town of La Plata curb and sidewalk maintenance and replacement program for introduction and consideration of adoption. This is a resolution concerning the town of La Plata curb and sidewalk maintenance program replacement program for the purpose of endorsing the town of La Plata Department of Public Works Administrative Policy, curb and sidewalk maintenance and replacement program, and all matters generally relating thereto.
Do I have a motion to adopt resolution 26-48 as presented? Since there is no motion, it fails. Going on to resolution 26-47.
I've got resolution 26-49. Is that?
Oh, I might have an old one. 49.
So resolution 26-49, this department.
Wait, I had it, I think you might have an old one. 47 is the new one. Madam Town Clerk, that is correct, right?
Yes, Madam Mayor, 2647 is the corrected number.
Okay.
Thank you.
7. Okay. Starting over, resolution 26-47, Department of Housing and Community Development comment letter for introduction and consideration of adoption. This is a resolution concerning the Department of Housing and Community Development comment letter for the purpose of authorizing the mayor to execute a comment letter to the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development related to the Oriole Lane Apartments development and all matters generally relating thereto.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt resolution 26-47 as presented?
So moved.
Thank you very much. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Sampson. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Brings us down to new business. We will start with Councilman Gutenberg on reports.
Yes, thank you. So last week we had a planning commission meeting and we discussed recommendations for an update to an ordinance to accessory dwelling units. I have APO on the brain. Accessory dwelling units. And this is largely a compliance-driven response to a state bill that was passed to remove some certain barriers from ADU ordinances at the municipal level. Our town planning department also added some features to it, which is completely appropriate. Interestingly, though, I think one of the things that struck me about it, doing a little research about La Plata's La Plata's ADU ordinance or accessory dwelling unit ordinance, is that we first adopted that ordinance back in 2019. And a couple of months ago, I got in contact with Mr. Dooley, the director of planning, and to find out about how many permits since that was released had been issued. And in La Plata, there have been 0. So I think the things that the state are doing in the ordinance that's going to come to us for an update removes some barriers. But I think and I discussed it in the planning commission, there's probably some other things that we're going to need to do in La Plata if we want to see any real movement on adoption of accessory dwelling units within the town. So I'm spoke on the planning commission that, about that need, and we'll have, I'm sure, future discussions about it there. And I guess this is the long way of me saying that we're going to see that ordinance come to us as a recommendation from the planning commission, but I don't think it'll be the last. I think we're going to continue working on that with additional recommendations for the council. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman McCormick?
Yes, first, thank you, Chief, back there. We had National Night Out. Another massive, massive success. Love seeing the Charles County Sheriff's Office, the La Plata Police Department, our other first responders, our residents, everybody that went out there. So thank you, and thanks for welcoming my family. I know John was a little disruptive during the invocation, but I appreciate the patience with him. But again, really important to recognize the work you do for our community, and I thought it was really cool to see the residents really come out and show that appreciation. So thank you, and thank you to everybody that works in that department and does that. Listen, Historic Preservation Committee, Mr. Stevens, you and I think we're sitting down with Mr. Dooley here in the end of August, if not early September. I forget the date off the top of my head, but I just want to inform the council, a lot of those actions that the Historic Preservation Committee did, and I wish I could take the credit, I can't. The liaison before me, Councilman Gutenberg, and that staff did a great job. But now we're going to really start going through that 5-year plan that they defined. So I just want to make sure the council's aware that we're going to start going through that and figuring out what needs to start being formally presented to the council and what needs to be further discussed in the committee. So looking forward to have some of those agenda items before you here in the near future.
Thank you very much, Councilman Six. Councilman Johnson?
Yes, I have a few comments or recognition. So one, the Wills Park Playground is done. It is absolutely beautiful. I'm too old to play on it, but I drive past it every day, either going or coming, and it's just complete joy for the amount of people that I see utilizing it. So well done to our contractor. Huge kudos to Kristen DeMar for her vision, and thanks staff for chugging along to get it open and still able to be used for the summer. I saw some anniversaries out there from town staff that I should know. Mr. Carl Swan, I believe he works for Public Works, celebrated 40 years of service to the town of La Plata on July 21st. So I know I see him around town all the time. I personally thank him, but to Chuck and Mr. Wilson, please express your thanks. Also followed by that is Mr. Delvin Dorsey, who celebrated 37 years of town service on July 24th. And of course, to all of our town employees that have anniversaries coming up or before, thank you so much for the work you've done or continue to do. We recognize, or at least I recognize it as a council, in the direction that the town is going and making tremendous progress. Please.
Madam Mayor, can I comment on it? Since you
Please.
brought it up. On your September 22nd meeting, we will be bringing in employees and recognizing them for their longevity. If you recall, during the budget, we created a new program to recognize senior tenured employee, well, not senior necessarily, at milestone dates, so 1 year, 5 year, 10, 15, 20, et cetera. So September 22nd, we will bring in the first tranche of those employees that we're going to recognize and give them certificates.
Well, sorry for stealing your thunder. We'll do it again.
It's great. It's a great lead and we get to talk about it twice.
And then also, I failed to mention, I also sent the inquiry to the Secretary of MDOT, asking, one, expressing my disappointment on the rescinded invitation and asking for clarifying answers as to why it was rescinded. And I am still waiting a response. And I look forward to that response. And I hope that, not to be cynical, that it's been proven this council have investigative authority. And I hope we don't have to take that route to get the answers that we need to get for something that is really simple. And I would just for any member, to me included, if council take a direction or something, that's the direction and we move on. It's part of democracy. So those are my comments, but really thank you to staff and our contractors for the work that they've done with the playground. It's really joyful watching the amount of people that's utilizing it throughout the day.
All right, and since we last met, I attended the MML symposium, and they were talking about financing and funding, and it was so educational, and the forecasts for the future and what our structural deficit for Maryland is going to look like. It was a little gloom and doom on that, but MML put on an excellent symposium and had many experts there. Unfortunately, we attended the funeral for Corporal Mark Powers, and that's always hard to say goodbye to someone, especially one that is not very old at all. But the police came out in force, and he really did have a beautiful send-off. National Night Out was great. Chief, you did good. We tried to hit all of them, and it was so nice to interact with our residents and meet them where they're at. And they had a lot of wonderful comments and suggestions. And one great suggestion at one of the stops was maybe thinking about some type of transportation to the concerts for seniors who are unable to drive. And they were talking about the 55 and plus the age restricted communities. And I thought that was really a great idea, especially since some of them said that they cannot drive at night, and we don't want them on the roads if they're not able to drive at night. The summer concerts are still going. We have one this Friday that are the Sidleys, but we only have 3 left with then a country music band will be there, and then we will conclude on August 28th with the dueling pianos out of National Harbor. Chief, good job on the Kent block party. If you couldn't have ordered a hotter day, I don't know what it was. It was so hot out there, but it was so nice to see community partners and people there to support all of the resources available to the kids going back to school. And then today I also attended the MML Legislative Priorities webinar where they talked about the 2 priorities that they will be championing for the municipalities. And the first one is trying to find more revenues for municipalities, because currently all we have are taxes, and it would be nice to be able to find something else out. So with that said, that it concludes my report, and I make a motion to adjourn. Thank you so much for joining us.